morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Fairfield Board of Finance public forum on the fiscal year 2016 budget to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I'm going to ask Deb Garabell, our secretary, to lead us in the pledge, and I think the flag is over there. Go ahead, Deb. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Flynn. I'm the chairman of the Board of Finance. And in the 8 years or so we've been running this forum, I can honestly say this is the first time we've ever run into snow. But we shouldn't be surprised given the winter that we've just gone through. Brief introductions. All the way to my far right is Tara Cook-Lippman, Mr. Bob Stone, John Matola, Mr. Jim Brown, Chris DeWitt, and David Becker. We've had a couple of members who have work commitments this time of year related to tax season and the like, and they may not be able to be here. This is an event that we look forward to every year. It's our opportunity to hear directly from the public your views on the budget that's been before us for the past month in the form of public comment. That does not mean public question. That does not mean that we can take the questions, but we will be listening to your comments. We do read all of the emails and all of the information that's brought to us, even though at times there are way too many people to respond individually. So we thank you for those. A little bit of decorum here, or rules of the road as I like to call it. This is a forum where we discuss differences in opinion. And it's important in every year we've been very lucky that members of the public treat each other with respect. We watch our tone, we watch our language, we watch our volume, and we listen to the other side as well as make our own cases for our own opinion. And that's very important. It's part of our democratic process. And it's also part of who we are as a town. This forum is sometimes viewed by school children, sometimes viewed by other members of the community, and it's good for them to see this debate and these healthy comments back and forth over important issues impacting all of us. I just hope that we do it in the right manner possible, and we try to do the same. There'll be 2 minutes is the time allotted for each comment. Given the crowd today, we can be a little bit flexible with that. There is a sign-in sheet when you come up to do your public comment, and Deb has asked that you print. I think she's saying that some of us have sloppy handwriting, but that you print your name and your address so that she can record that into our records. And I also ask that we try not to be repetitive. We'll try the same thing. We're politicians, we like to hear ourselves talk, so sometimes we are repetitive, but we try not to be. And we ask members as well, or members of the public as well, to bring up salient and new points for our consideration during this budget process. A programming note, we will be voting on this budget, I believe, Thursday night at the Board of Education building, and that'll be at a 7:30 that meeting will take place. I will also allow my colleagues here in the course of the meeting, if there's some comment that's made and they would like to respond to that for whatever reason. Sometimes there are some factual errors or misconceptions or miscommunications. I would give them the opportunity, if anyone would like to, and also at the end of this meeting they can make any statement they would like to make. With that, do I have any questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, we'll welcome everybody to the podium at the time. Mr. Morton, you had a question. Good idea, yes. And if somebody would like to do it when they come up, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. All right, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thanks very much for your service and for hosting this meeting each year. I'd like to make Bud Morton, Saskville Road. 3 quick points on the budget and then a few other comments. First, after 10 years, when taxes and spending in Fairfield have increased at 2.5 to 3 times the rate of inflation, it is really good for Fairfield that the tax increase this year is close to the rate of inflation. Second, it is also really good that the first selectman has called for the creation of a strategic plan for the town. Hopefully that plan will address the need for more non-residential commercial development that will ease the tax burden on residential taxpayers. Hopefully also as part of that plan, we will finally get the breakdowns of town and BOE budgets by program and service so that we can all make well-informed decisions about what we want and what we can afford. Third, if we can do no harm in the future, by keeping our tax increases no greater than the rate of inflation, we can focus instead on the problems at the state level, on which subject I have given each of you copies of 3 recent articles that I'll summarize quickly for others. The first one says that Connecticut ranks among the 3 worst states in terms of its combined state and local taxation. The second one says, not surprisingly, that Connecticut is losing population. In other words, people are voting with their feet. The third one says, again not surprisingly, that Connecticut is one of only 2 states over the last 12 months in which home prices declined as of January, which is the latest data. And it is one of the 5 worst states in terms of decline in home prices from their peak, whenever that was, to now. Note that we are in very bad company in this regard. The other 4 states who have the worst record in terms of peak to current home price declines are Nevada, Arizona, Florida, and Rhode Island. And the first 3 of those had a huge boom in home construction that we did not have before the crash. The only way to solve these problems is to control spending. And the only way to do that is to stop assuming that public employee compensation should continue to increase from what is already a substantial premium at a time when taxpayer incomes are still below where they were in 2008. Hopefully, as the town's financial experts, the Board of Finance can help everyone understand the consequences of overly generous wages, benefits, and work rules for public employees. Once again, thank you for this opportunity and for the fine work the Board of Finance has done in the last 10 years and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
David McKenzie, Merwins Lane, RTM District 3. My thanks also for the Board of Finance holding this, because you're a very important part of the whole budget process, and I really appreciate what you do. And I also am happy that we started with a budget of 1.6% growth, which I think is great. But also, we're the benefit of a windfall year, which is 0.5% higher in revenue as a result of the grand list going up with new building. We're the benefit of pensions, funding the pension being able to go down because the stock market has been good. We have the benefit of refinancing our bonds so that also reduces our outlay. If we did not have that, we would be up 5.4% in town expenses, and the education budget is up 3.3%, even though the Board of Ed had expressed their intent or hope that they would be at the 2% level. They said that at our meeting in December. So that being the case, recognizing it's a windfall year, I have 2 hopes. One is that the Board of Finance will not stop in scrutinizing line items to make sure that we squeeze out excess wherever it is. The fact that we start at a good place doesn't mean we have to finish at the same place if we can do better. Secondly, my request is that next year, when we won't have the benefit of these windfall items, that the Board of Finance will recognize that we should contain the budget to no more than the growth as fast as the inflation, since that's what taxpayers are faced with on their incomes. Thank you.
40+ years, Fairfield. I again appreciate your efforts. I think the idea of having a public forum is great. And I compliment you on having to deal with the annual tug-of-war. You got the seniors, keep taxes down. I, for one, want to keep more seniors staying at home in Fairfield, living in Fairfield. We're losing too many by moving. We're losing some by age, naturally. And obviously the PTAs want to spend more on education, and that's an issue that you've been struggling with every year. My main concern is fiscal responsibility. I spent 40 years corporate finance, and I still wonder we don't have a long-range financial plan. And are you restricted, is Board of Finance restricted from putting together a three-year plan of finances? I don't know. I don't know the charter, but I just wonder why you haven't done so. And I've mentioned this the last couple of years. I just think it's worth putting in. I think it's a central part of this.
Thank you very much. Let me take the opportunity to just address that for 1 minute, just because that's come up in the past. First of all, I'm very happy that the first selectman is taken a recommendation that I've made for the past number of years to do a strategic plan for the town. And anyone knows that a long-term financial plan, whether it be 3, 5, 7, 9, 10 years, starts with a strategic plan. It starts with knowing what services you want to provide, the best manner in which to provide those, and where you want to put your resources. And without that plan of what a 21st century town looks like and what the services that a 21st century town provides to its citizens looks like, it's very difficult to do a longer-term financial plan because you just don't know what you're planning for. So it's my hope that that'll be the first step in doing exactly what you say. Now, because we're elected bodies and because these elected bodies can change over time, I think the Board of Education can change up to 5 members this year, and certainly the representative town meeting can change the entire board, and we can change, I guess, 3 at a time. We cannot commit to that 3-year plan. It's beyond our term. We can't future boards. But we certainly leave a blueprint and kind of the direction we're heading for those next boards for their consideration as they make their challenging decisions year upon year upon year. So I hope we're moving in that direction. I've been advocating moving in that direction for a long time. I know other members of our board have. So it's my hope that that comes to fruition. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? I think someone already signed in. Please feel free, whoever's signed in.
Good morning. My name is Gail Francolini, and I'm speaking to you today wearing 3 different hats. Not surprisingly, the different hats all produce the same view, just from different perspectives. First, I speak as the president of the Stratfield PTA. I am proud to say that our executive board voted and unanimously agreed to support the Board of Ed budget as proposed by Dr. Title and his staff. Second, I speak to you as a parent of a second grader who loves learning and all of the educational, social, and growth opportunities she's receiving from her school. I have reviewed the budget as a parent prepared by Dr. Title and his staff, and it's a thoughtful, fair, and reasonable one. Lastly, I speak to you as a taxpayer and as a resident of the town. In 2007, the education budget represented 58% of Fairfield's total budget. Today, that percentage has decreased to 54.5%. During that same time frame, student enrollment actually grew 8%. What that says to me from a fiscal perspective is that education in the schools is less important now than it was 6 years ago. Our neighboring towns have clearly made the other choice, where they value education more than we do, as evidenced by the fact that they budget between 60 and 70% of their town's budgets for their schools. As the woman who spoke before me said, these are comparisons that people make when deciding where to live. and where to raise a family and where to spend their money. Please keep Fairfield strong. Please keep the values of our homes strong. Achieve both those goals by supporting the education budget. Please make us proud to live in the town of Fairfield. Thank you.
Yeah. So I do want to respond to a couple of comments there, just because I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. The town's Board of Education budget is over 60% of our town's budget. And we continue to invest in education year over year. This board has invested a fair amount of money both in the operating side as well as capital. I've heard reference before at other meetings the cost per student and the differential in the cost per student over the last number of years. Here's what's happened there. We have a large school district that has grown from 10 years ago about 8,000 students to now about 10,000 students. Within that school's district, there's a large amount of fixed costs. There's the cost for the buildings, there's the cost for the programs, there's the cost for central office, which has stayed steady, and I give them a lot of credit for that. They have not increased their central office staff in that 10-year period. What that does, though, is those fixed costs don't go up by the same rate as the number of students. So when you look at it as just how much are we spending per pupil, that amount is actually, while it's not coming down, it's not growing as fast as other communities because we're covering our fixed costs by having that many more students, right? So that while it would appear that we're not as investing as much in education, that's kind of a false read on it because the rate of growth of our students has been so high. In fact, I believe, I'll go on a limb, I believe Mr. Dwyer's here, I think it's the highest in the state. Most of the towns within the state, their enrollment are flat to down. And we're one of very few communities in the entire state of Connecticut where our enrollment has actually grown quite dramatically over the last decade. So I don't want anybody to think that the town, and in particular this board, or the Board of Education, has dramatically pared back on the investment in education. I think we can be quite proud of our school system and quite proud of the work that's done over there, quite proud of the administration, and quite proud of a lot of the accomplishments that have been done under the Board of Education. And I wonder if any of my colleagues, Mr. Stone? Here.
The only thing I want to add to that is Fairfield has 2 high schools, which the town voted for, and as opposed to Greenwich, which has the same population, they have 1 high school. So we have duplications in what we're paying for the, for the high school costs. So I just want to bring that up.
Next speaker, please. Good morning.
Jennifer Lebarsky, 104 Queens Grant Lane. I'm speaking on behalf of Dwight PTA. Dwight PTA Executive Board supports Dr. Title's education budget as passed by the Board of Education. We urge you to pass it in its entirety.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. And thank you for signing in, too. I appreciate you taking the time to sign on a little document so we memorialize you.
Kelly McWhinney, Churchill Road. Thank you so much for your service. I came with prepared comments, but after hearing other comments, I'd really like to just speak to those. As far as the windfall that we are experiencing this year, the school budget suffered when the economy went down. We went to 0% increases. So it concerns me that when things have rebounded and the town is in a better spot, there is even a question that the school should not benefit from that. Also, I am a former teacher, and the suggestion that we are overcompensating our teachers, I'll try to be moderate here, it really strikes a chord. These are professionals. They are required to get advanced degrees, and they work, the differentiation that they are required to do in every single classroom in this school is tremendous. So to act as if they are not, that they don't deserve, proper compensation is very difficult for me to listen to. As far as paying more taxes than other towns, for instance, in Westport, they do not pay less taxes than we do. Their property values are higher, and you can take, if you sold your house now and bought the same thing in Westport, you would be living in a smaller home. So they pay just as much in taxes as we do. It's just a question of value. And we chose Fairfield for the balance of quality school systems and value. In terms of, the fact that Fairfield has more students requires more teachers, and teachers are our largest expense. So when you're talking about per pupil expenditures, it does have an impact. The difference in a kindergarten classroom between 18 students and 25 is huge, and I pity the kindergarten teacher who has to deal with that. In short, I forgot to add, I am a member of the North Stratfield Executive Board, and we support the budget as it stands, and we would really appreciate your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tom, members of the board, I'm Dave Sturgis, 375 Warner Hill Road in Southport. And I'm here this morning to underscore and advocate the appropriation item of $350,000 toward the operation of the Pequot Library. This historic collaboration between the town and the Library Association goes back to 1926, when the death of the library's original benefactor, Virginia Monroe, left the library absolutely without operational viability. And the town at the time wanted this collaboration because the public library system then wasn't what it is now. And passing judgment on this unique association has to be weighed by a realization that public and private collaboration in the case of Pequot is not unique. Even the Fairfield Library's main headquarters, that was put up by Annie Burr Jennings. And this all harks back to the late 19th century and the early 20th, when families, mine included, came to the benefit of the town by creating these resources, which the town at the time wouldn't have been able to do. And in the time since, we were quite fortunate with the result of their vision and their resources, because it has given us a library system which is truly unique. And this must continue. In the case of Pequot, you not only have to think of what it's doing now to help maintain all the operational presentations and educational programs that it is offering the entire town, and these have been well publicized and are well familiar. But I do want to give a glimpse into the future necessity of this appropriation. And that has to do with Pequot's Americana collection, which was created by not only the Marcons and the Monroes, but the Wakeman family. And they specified in their wills and testaments that this collection should be permanently housed in the town at Pequot in Southport in perpetuity for one purpose, and that was the benefit in the education of town youth. And there's also an additional significance
We're running
to
out of
this,
time. So,
and that is scholarship. And we're going to have to bring these collections home. And plans are being established for that, and the lion's share of the funding that is going to fall on the association. Now, I need to add in closing that I have a personal stake in this in working with the library, because as a collateral descendant of not only my family but the Wakeman's, I happen to have inherited half of the Wakeman collection. The other half is in Pequot hands, and I need to make a decision on this, and I want it to go to Pequot to join the rest. And this is only going to happen as we can look toward the future, and the town appropriation is very much a part and parcel in this. Please let it go through as it was submitted.
Thank you. Can you please sign in, Mr. Sturgis? Okay, thank you. Go right ahead.
Hi, Steve Baker, 22 Charles Street. I'm a very proud member of this community. I'm proud of all the people who volunteer their time and everybody who stays active. I just want to say I think that by the size of this crowd as compared to the size of the crowd last year, that people are a little tired of fighting. And I think this budget shows that the balance between efficiencies and the value that we get from our taxpayer dollars has really reached a perfect compromise, and people would rather compromise than fight. So I urge you to support this budget. It's okay to dance when the music's good.
Thank you.
Link Rosita, 440 Reading Road, Fairfield.
Good morning.
Hi. So I just want to speak specifically about the Board of Education budget. 7 years ago, when my family moved to Connecticut, of all the services that towns provide, by far the most important was education. And it wasn't just, are there good schools there today, but is the town committed to continually improving the education in the town? And I think over the last 6 years, I've seen that, whether it's increase in AP courses, or specifically in this year's budget, the commitment to improving special education services. And I would just like to say that I hope that this board and the RTM going forward supports the budget for education fully and continues to do so in the future.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Mark Beatty. I'm at 175 Wormwood. I just wanted to say that I support the budget, and in particular, the education budget. I've attended a couple of these, and it just seems like there's a real tension between either people that are, pro-education budget, not. And, I don't know that taxes versus education has to be, I don't know that, having fiscal responsibility is mutually exclusive from having a good,
Correct.
Education. And to the extent I also realize from being a numbers guy that, you get a lot of bang from the buck. Since education is such a large part of the budget, a small reduction there is, a bigger reduction. But what I would say is I would challenge you, to the extent there are any kind of needs for budgets or for further reductions, which I don't think there should be, but if there are, then I would challenge you to look other places and kind of spread that around. I mean, there's Towers-Watson surveys that say that, only 20% of corporate America has a pension plan. But my guess is there's probably a ongoing non-frozen pension plan. What's the medical trend, prescription drug trend? I mean, there's other ways to save and be more efficient with your dollars rather than just looking for an easy cut. Sometimes it has to be more painful, and the risk needs to be spread around, not just to the people in the town, not just to seniors, not to just to people with fixed incomes, and not just to young people with young families. It also needs to be carried and spread around the town.
Thank you.
Good morning, John Kenton, Unclewall Road, actually a couple of doors down, so I appreciate your holding here and within walking distance, even with the snow.
We did it just for you.
Thank you.
The one guy who didn't have to.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm a schools and libraries advocate, so I would encourage you to support the budget with these items included. Pequot is really a unique and generational asset, as the guy alluded to. The schools, you do get bang for the buck. Granted, and you got to take care of your people too, public servants and the pensions, et cetera. I would encourage you, I know it's not necessarily your bailiwick, but working with the First Selectman, et cetera, to develop or encourage prudent development of some of the dormant properties around here so they can be performing assets, and maybe that side of the sheet will help you and the town get out of these type of sticky wickets. So encouraging you to support the budget. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
My name is Brian Stern. I'm a foreigner as far as Fairfield is concerned because I live in Westport and I am Vice Chairman of the Board of Finance at Westport. I actually was not intending to speak today, but to observe your process, which I think is benchmark in terms of public participation. So I have a couple of points to make, if that's okay.
Please.
And that is to support, Tom, your efforts to have a strategy for Fairfield. We need a strategy for Westport. We have the same problems. Actually, we have the same good things happening this year, as one speaker mentioned. We have an increasing tax base, both on the commercial side and the Grand List. We have the benefits of a good, robust market that has helped us reduce our ARC payments for pensions. Yeah, those two things. And they have basically masked the real underlying cost problems and productivity problems that we have as a town. I would urge you to go into the strategic process, and I'll give you one example that we use in Westport, and that is for every one house, one dwelling that has 2 people in the school system, we need another 2 houses with no kids paying their tax just to break even on that. And so in the strategy that you have, I urge you to consider a small change in those people who don't have kids in school. In other words, leaving town, going to Florida, North Carolina, what have you, makes a huge difference to those people who remain and have a good education in your town. So the consequence in the long term, as part of the strategy, of a tax problem, taxes going up twice the rate of inflation, which we have had in Westport also. If that continues over the long term, who suffers? It's the kids who will suffer ultimately. And that's why we need a strategy. Last point, because I'm going on too long, but I think comparative tax issues is actually quite an interesting thing for our towns to do. And that is, we need to get together in Fairfield County and do something about state mandates. We need to do something about inheritance tax that impacts people leaving our communities and destroying our tax base. And we need to do something about the arbitration process. And if we can do it as towns together, in Westport, we would like to talk to you and see if there's any way we can do that. I congratulate you on your process.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. We appreciate it very much.
Hi, Vicki Vinosky, 1485 Brookside Drive. And to start with, I also want to thank you for your service to our town and just for being here today to hear the voices of our community. I've been encouraged this budget season to see the collaboration between the boards as this budget has kind of come forward, beginning with the Board of Education. And I just would love to see that continue as we go forward through the rest of the boards and even on to next year. And I just simply am here to ask for your support of the education budget, presented as it is, to continue going forward, as Dr. Title has presented it. And again, thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, who's next? Come on down.
Good morning, Neil Fink, 70 Crest Terrace. Here today speaking not only on my own behalf, but also on behalf of the Fairfield PTA Council. We had a vote that it was interesting actually this year because although, you know, of course you would assume that most PTA members support the education budget, but in the years that I've been involved in the council, this is actually the first year that we had a 100% unanimous vote to support the education budget. Even our most fiscally conservative members, and yes, you know, parents too are concerned about taxes and about fiscal restraint. But I think that parents and, you know, the leadership of the PTAs looked this year at the budget process, at what Dr. Title presented, at what the work that the Board of Ed did and their thoughtful deliberations, and concluded that, you know, this is a good and responsible education budget. You know, this year, although that, you know, thank you to the First Selectman and, you know, strong markets and other conditions that allowed the townside budget to have, you know, what, at least in all the years I've been in Fairfield, seems to be a record low increase on the town side, which is making up for a larger than recent increase in the education side. I think one of the things that we've learned after the last few years about the education budget is that, you know, we've had 5 years of budgets on the education side that have averaged at or below the rate of inflation, you know, over those 5 years. But this was achieved through a combination of measures. Of course, you know, I'm proud that the district was able to make some cost-saving measures, some increased efficiencies, and a lot of work was done there. This year's budget book has, I believe, 3 pages of summarizing cost-saving measures that have been taken. But it's also been achieved through things like postponing maintenance projects and postponing technology purchases. It's been achieved through employee concessions and a reduction in programs. This year, part of the increase, and, you know, some people might tell me, you know, Neil, keep your mouth shut because maybe some people didn't notice, but of course you noticed. There are some increases in programs this year. There are some new items in the budget. They're not truly new. They're actually trying to finally regain some things that we lost over the last several years in efforts to close budget gaps. And it's a unique opportunity for you and the other boards, the Board of Selectmen, for the RTM, to not just maintain the status quo, but to actually invest in increasing the quality, to invest in our children, and in the end, which, you know, becomes investing in our community and investing in our home values. Finally, I'm probably out of time, but if I can just, you know, say that I think on both sides, actually, of the budget debate that we have every year, I don't believe that this attendance today is actually reflective of how much the community is concerned or cares. I think part of it, frankly, and there's no benefit in me kind of sucking up to you guys, but I think that there's a lot of confidence in this board. Of all of the elected boards in town, the Board of Finance historically has been, I would say, the most deliberative, the most contemplative, really weighing both sides and looking at the numbers and looking at the financial needs of the town and making, you know, what I feel have been intelligent decisions on the budget, both education and otherwise. So I thank you for that. I hope you'll keep it up. If you don't mind, I'd like to give you a copy for those of you who haven't seen it. The Fairfield PTA High Five for Fairfield Students, which talks about some of our priorities and values that also factor into the budget. Thank you again.
Please feel free. Mr. Fick, if you could give that to our secretary when you get up, that'll save you the time. And thank you for your kind comments. Next, whoever else, feel free.
Good morning, and thank you again for all of your help and your expertise. My name is Robin Strong from Cedar Road in Southport. I have a question. When I come to these meetings, I always hear the school perspective and the educational perspective, and then there's a real estate perspective. My question's pertaining to the real estate perspective. Do you as a board get feedback, or do you directly solicit from the real estate community statistics, trends, what the actual state of the real estate market is in Fairfield at any given time? Because I note that a lot of the comments that are made on behalf of the real estate market are very anecdotal. And usually, even amongst the real estate community, broad-based statements are made concerning the state of the real estate market. It's coming back. It's, you know, people hear about the New York City real estate market and they think that pertains out here, that everything's gone crazy in prices. And So my question is, do you get actual statistics and information from our community? Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for your comments. While this isn't supposed to be about questions but more comments, I will answer that because I think it's very well noted and a good thought. Well, we do not get formal presentations on that. We do get a lot of information from the real estate community, including Mr. Stone, who is a very active member of that community. But one of the interesting things we did a number of years ago was we put in place a budget subcommittee whose entire job is, at the end of this process, to review and make recommendations for things that went well, things that didn't go well, things that we can do differently for next year. And I'd like to recommend that our subcommittee take up your idea of a formal presentation well before the budget process, maybe in the fall, so that we have that information not only available to us, but also available to the other bodies that go through this process. So to answer your question, we get it, we monitor it, we understand it, but it's not as formal as you're recommending, and that might be a damn good idea for us to look at going forward. And that must tell me my time is up. Or maybe they didn't like the suggestion. But,
Thank you.
Well, we do, there's most certainly, I mean, there are formal statistics we get from the town related to conveyance tax and building permits and things like that, but not as formal as I think the lady is recommending. I think it's a good idea, so thank you for that.
Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, and can you sign in, please? Other questions, comments?
Hi, I'm Herb Limecooler. I live on Spruce Street.
We have liftoff.
Thanks for saving me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Not sure what I did. Thank you.
Next speaker. No, kidding.
Herb Limecooler, I live on Spruce Street, and I just wanted to thank you all for your service and, again, having this session. I also wanted to thank and try to reiterate a bit the comments that have been made about the importance of long-term strategic planning and also about the long-term perspective on the budget. And I know we deal with all sorts of short-term pressures, and we've got many constituents and that are very important in town, including the education constituency. And we're always juggling many balls, but I think there's nothing more important than looking at the town from a long-term planning and strategic perspective. And just a really quick story. When I was a student in college in the 1970s, the tuition was such that a hardworking student could pretty much pay his or her own tuition by working hard during the summers and working during the school year. And just imagine trying to do that today. And what's happened is over that period of time, we saw a growth in higher education costs at 2 times or more the growth in incomes and inflation. And that had a pernicious impact, insidious impact on all of society, on our students, on families. I think we want desperately to avoid that happening here. And our future as a town, I think, really depends on making sure that the growth in spending really doesn't exceed the growth in our incomes, not just in any given year, but over the long-term period. So that's my plea and hope that's what long-term, the focus on long-term strategic planning will bring, is a focus on building Fairfield and maintaining Fairfield for the long term. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments?
David McInnes, 301 Sasker Hill Road. I've been a member of the community and a taxpayer for over a decade now, and I'm really I'm glad to see the process that's been going on this budget cycle, as some others have noted. I think Dr. Title and the Board of Ed have once again created a really wonderful budget. I'm big proponent of the public school system here, having 3 children in it. And I think it's good to, a big driver of that, unfortunately, is salaries, and I know there's been some work done on that. As well as that budget, I think the town side has done a very good job this year of keeping their increase fairly low. So, and I think a lot of the programs that have been talked about here are ones that we have cut over time, and some of those would be nice to get back to improve our school system and to improve the town. In addition, I think the idea of long-term planning is one that's very important for us. We'd like to see that continue, because it's not only the growth in the expenses that are a problem potentially, but also the how our tax base is growing. And as we can improve that tax base, we can obviously fund a better community. So thank you very much for your effort, and thank you for allowing the public to come and comment at this time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Hugh Donnelly. I live at 150 Brookbend Road. I've been a happy resident of this town since 1995. And I also want to express my thanks to you as a group, because I know you do a lot of work. The work you do is thanklessly burdensome. My recommendation to you, and let me, before I make it, preface it, I have 3 children. 2 have gone through the school system. They're off in college now. I have a 3rd child who's just beginning high school. My recommendation to you is to please keep the school budget within the rate of inflation. I am a big education proponent. I know that throughout the working life of my children, the idea of job stability or security is not going to exist, that they're going to be called upon to reinvent themselves multiple times. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is by having a first-rate education, which I believe they have received. However, my concern is, as a homeowner, someone in the private sector, where wage stagnation has been the rule for the last 10 years or longer. Yes, we have to invest in education. That's an absolute necessity. But we can't do it at the rate that you force people out of town. If we don't rein in the budget to at least the rate of inflation, what we're actually engaging in is a form of financial genocide, if you think about it. Yes, we're motivated for the children, but what about the parents of the children who can't pay those taxes? What do you think happens? They're forced out. I'm very fortunate to live in this town. But as I think a lot of you realize, those who are in the private sector, the storm is not over. Not at all. Yes, things are better than they were in 2008, 2009. But the spending in this town in terms of education, as we all know, has far exceeded the rate of inflation. And it's not sustainable. What happens? Slowly but surely, people will be forced out of this town. And I'm not just talking about people who are retired empty nesters. No, it's people who are still in the working ages of their lives. So what I'm asking you to do, and it may not be popular, I'm asking you, please, keep the budget within the rate of inflation. It'll still be growing. It won't be stagnant. It'll still be growing. But long term, that is in the best interest of the residents of this town and the children of this town. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing. I know it is not easy.
Thank you very much, sir. Any other comments?
Good morning. My name is Ken Lee. I live at 71 Rhoda Avenue.
Mr. Lee.
Thank you for braving the snowstorm this morning. We appreciate it.
It was a trek.
When I got here, there wasn't any place to park. I was a little surprised when I walked in.
We did that on purpose, actually.
That was well done, yes. It's a shame you couldn't schedule a football team too. I'm optimistically hoping that this will be a little bit less acrimonious this year. Certainly looks like it. And I do support the budget, although I suspect it will probably might even be a little low because I'm looking at our roads. But I guess that's not really what I had on my mind. I received an email from a local organization which prompted me to come out and play this morning. And they were commenting at one thing that caught me in particular was the fact that the grand list had increased due to a lot of new construction down around the beach. Well, I happen to live right smack in the middle of that construction. The interesting thing about that was that after Sandy, when a large number of homes were damaged, a large number of seniors left because they couldn't afford to rebuild their homes. There was no screams of outrage at that particular point in time, no attempts to try to keep them in. All those houses were rebuilt. Lots of builders made a lot of money. The seniors got lowballed because they had no choice because they needed a place to live. Now they're $1.6 million homes, and they're being purchased with people with children. I find that kind of interesting. I'm not a realtor, so maybe that's uncommon in the rest of town, but you know, it just says something to me about what people are looking for and who those people are. I don't think seniors are coming down to buy those homes. I haven't seen any. The second thing is I have a couple of kids. I have a kid in college. My daughter will be going to college hopefully in 5 years. Paying for that, I'm sure, will involve selling body parts, but I'm looking forward to it. But, you know, there's lots of ways to deal with a budget. I have a personal budget. It's not complicated like the town, but I have some decisions to make. My daughter takes dance. My son played soccer. And I don't drive a Mercedes. I drive a 9-year-old soccer mom van. That's a decision of economy, too. You know, the tax increase, at least for me, is a couple $100 a year. To me, that's not a deal breaker. I can find that money somewhere. I really think that we have to think a little bit about what the impact of it on individuals is as opposed to what the impact it is to our entire community, all the people that live in this town, especially the people that are not as advantaged as some others. And that's all I really had to say today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Hello,
Good
Mr.
morning
Jones.
to all my friends on the Board of Finance. Doug Jones, 1304 Fairfield Woods Road. I'm just going to shoot my mouth off for a minute. Effective June, whatever the graduation funding will be, I'm assuming it doesn't snow anymore, I will no longer have a child in the school system. I will continue. I'm not leaving town like some people do once the kids graduate from our excellent schools. And I'll be running for RTM again. And with the new districts, I think I have a chance to win. If I can talk to some people who live in my neighborhood who might think about voting for me. And
Is your official announcement to that?
yeah, sure. Forming an exploratory. But should I win, I will continue to advocate for making smart investments in town resources. I think the schools have been terrific for my kids, and I think that services that this town provides are also very important in maintaining the quality of life in this town. And if elected, I will be delighted to serve with this board, Board of Education, on a long-term strategic planning group process. I'm happy to do that. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Appreciate it. Anyone else have any comments? Okay. If we can line up to save time, that'd be great.
Hello, dear board. I'm Jana Finaro, 57 Riverside Drive, and thank you so much for your service for volunteering. It's a lot of hours. And I did not prepare any notes, but I just wanted to say that I am here on behalf of my 3 kids. And I'm also somewhat of a new resident. We moved here a year and a half ago, and kind of wanted to try Fairfield and thought of other towns. And this year we actually were thinking, well, we still have our house in Texas, which we're selling as of right now, and thinking we should be buying a house, let's say here in Fairfield, or should we move back to my husband's hometown in Madison, Guilford, let's say, which is up the street, kind of up the shoreline. And then we thought to ourselves, well, let's look at this and let's compare and what Fairfield has to offer, both in terms of education, but not just in education, but the libraries and the resources that we have, the Public Works Department that does fantastic work as well, the Police Department, and etc. Well, here I'm today to advocate for the Board of Education budget, of course. As we, as a family, decided that we want to stay in this town, and I'd like to see this to be somewhat of a priority for all of us, which is a priority for my family right now. We're sitting in this beautiful building, Fairfield Ludlow High School, with my daughter attends, who is a junior, and will be hopefully graduating next year and going probably to the United States Military Academy next year. And my son, who has special needs and is outplaced currently, and we're hoping to come back to the district next year. And then I have a youngest who is Sherman Elementary School. So obviously I'm vested in that, and but however, I just wanted to say it's a great place to live. We love being in Fairfield. We're choosing to stay here. We're choosing to buy a house here. Therefore, in a way, we're increasing the tax base, hopefully, like all many people are going to do as well. So I'm hoping that you support the budget. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I am Cynthia Crawford. I live at 1028 Pequot Avenue, and I would like to thank you for all you do for the town, and also ask you to support the budget allocation for Pequot Library. Pequot Library provides special programs for people of all ages, and we need your continued support. So thank you very much for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Kane. I'm at 470 Jackman Avenue. I do thank you for your service, and I think there's been a lot of good comments already made today. And when I think about living in this community, what brought me to this community 15 years ago was much like some of the other people have mentioned, and that it was about the schools, it was about the education that my kids would be able to get from the public schools, and I've really appreciated that. Being in the business world, you know that a business model that doesn't invest in the future is a doomed model. It may be good for today, but is not a sustainable model. So I encourage you to think about what I consider the most prized possession of any community, and that's the children and the children that come out of that community. And that we continue to invest in our schools, and I realize the balance that you have. The gentleman from Westport I thought was outstanding in that, this is a balancing act. If every family came to town and had kids, that would be a real problem. So we need to keep a balance in there. But at the end of the day, I think what we're all trying to do is invest in our kids, invest in the future, and I think that will definitely support the town and benefit every one of us that owns real estate or likewise here. So I would ask that you continue to support the Board of Education budget and not look there for the cuts, and continue to invest in our most prized possession, and that's our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melanie Fox Carvalho, 14 Westbrook Place. I don't particularly like public speaking, so I'll keep it brief. I think last time I came before you, it was really with the same message, which is that Dr. Title, the Board of Ed, worked very hard to present a thoughtful budget which considers infrastructure as well as programming, and listens very carefully to all the different bodies, as you do, and tries to perform a very difficult task and still remain alive, which is probably a concern that you guys might have as well. But I would have to say today I'm very encouraged.
Well, I do now.
No, I don't run very fast. I'm very encouraged today, though, by the thoughtful tenor and respect that various viewpoints and constituents of this town have presented. And I think it sounds like we're on a really responsible course, not only for the budget before us, but for the future ones. So I would again reiterate that you support Dr. Title's budget as presented. And also I have one other note. I live on the far side of Fairfield, far away from Pequot Library, but I have to say, as a 20-year resident, I have been very happy to have that resource here within the town. And I realize that we do have other libraries, but you basically have sort of an art and architectural treasure, which really adds to the quality, along with facilities like the Quick Center of Fairfield, and I think it's an important part of the community, and I would hope that you would support that appropriations as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Gaylord Meyer, District 1, RTM, 51 Spruce Street. Thank you for your service. You've heard a lot of comments today. What I can say as a resident of this town for 38 years, we have all seen considerable changes. And I think it was the forefathers of the Board of Finance and the forefathers of the Selectmen and the RTMs that have given us the educational system. This has been sustainable. The town services. You know, we all have budgets and we all have families, and I think when you sit down at the end of the year and you go, well, how am I going to pay for this? I personally have not had a 2% or a 3% or a 4% increase, and many of my constituents have not either. And I don't think it's very difficult in your position to be able to cut that pie up. Education is important. I believe in education. I have 2 children. I've educated them here. But then there are the people in this town that don't have children, but did, educated their children, worked in this town. And they were, like Mr. Lee said, they bought these little capes, and they thought that they could live there for the rest of their life. And guess what? They can't, because the taxes keep going up. Their medications go up. They're not getting the income that they used to have. It's not sustainable. So how do we do that? I can only tell you what my constituents ask for me, and that is for you to be fiscally responsible in all of our affairs. And sometimes you have to say, we're not going to give you an increase, but we'll keep it the same, so everything stays the same. We've got the pensions that we just came up for the teachers. That contract, the teachers' contract, the Cadillac tax, which is going to come up. Where are we going to get this money from? And that's not something that the average taxpayer knows. And trust me, I didn't know that 8 years ago until I walked in the first Board of Finance meeting. And I stood up, scared to death, and said, you can't do this. You can't keep raising these taxes. And unfortunately, the incomes have not caught up with the taxes for a lot of the residents in this town. So I respectfully ask you, and I know that you do the best you can for all of the residents that live in this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Hi, John Levinson from Harbor Road in Southport. First off, thank you for all your work. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, and you guys and gals have to work a lot to come to the decisions we make. I want to congratulate Mr. Tetro and the town for a budget rising only 1.64% as proposed, broadly in line with inflation. On the town side, spending being proposed to rise under 1%, I think it's 0.77 or so, shows the type of fiscal restraint and positive budget trade-offs that Fairfield needs to make this year and in years going forward. Regarding the BOE, I was actually very encouraged by the teacher's budget negotiation that occurred in the fall. But the BOE's proposed budget to increase 3.3% posts a host of questions, none of which I fully really understand, and I can really not dig into given the amount of information disclosed. First and foremost, I call for greater transparency in a budget in Excel format, which is very easy, I'd say easy as pie, to put into Excel, given that the budget resides in the Access database. Both of Access and Excel are Microsoft products and made to integrate and swap data between. It is not a problem. Why is the proposed budget rising 3.3%, the highest in 7 years? It's not student population. That's flattened out, up insignificantly for the proposed year, and it peaked 5 years ago. It can't be the teacher's salary and benefits, since that new contract, according to Mr. Dwyer's testimony, is rising only 1.7% in each of the future years of the contract. Given that the teacher's salaries and benefits represent 75 to 80% of the budget, and that's rising 1.7%. What's going on with the other 25% of the budget that has to grow about 9% to get you at 3.3? I'm confused by that. There is no way to find the answer given the information that has been given out. So I ask you to take a hard look at the BOE budget, especially given the constraint that the teachers have made with their negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to clarify a couple misconceptions, though, because I think that's been out there. I'm not going to speak for Mr. Dwyer, so, and I'm not asking him to speak at this meeting. But when you look at the Board of Education budget, the year-over-year increase related to teachers and their salary based on the contracts that were signed, but this year I believe it goes up about 2.8%, and in future years it'll go up a little over 3% on the salary side. Now, there were certain trade-offs made in those negotiations, which this board is not a part of. We have no role to play in contract negotiations, as unbelievably as that might sound, given there's such a large percentage of our budget. But the teachers' salaries themselves, the teacher and what they refer to as certified staff, represents about $75 million out of about a $155, $156 million budget. That increase year over year is about 2.8%. Add on to that the fact that even with the concessions made by the teachers' unions and negotiation by the Board of Education with some of the medical care costs, that increase is going to be $2 million year over year in just those costs. So when you look at the costs of personnel for certified staff in the Board of Education, it is going up closer to that 3%. Now, I believe, and we had this discussion in our meeting the other night, when you look at that cost as part of the overall budget for the Board of Education, the impact of that increase is about 1.7, 1.8% on the overall budget. But those line items themselves are going up closer to that 3% mark, that their entire budget. So the math is a little bit off. In other words, the other expenses aren't going up as high as you think they are, because the costs of the personnel costs are actually a higher percentage of the budget and are going up closer to that 3%. We had that entire discussion at our meeting earlier this week, and that would be available on Fair TV, and you can see it there. And Mr. Dwyer was, and the Chief Fiscal Officer, both were active participants in that discussion. But I think that's where the common confusion is coming up with those numbers, because I've heard that before myself. So does anybody have anything to add to that? Did I misrepresent, or did I say it appropriately?
Well said.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that went. Thank you very much for your comments. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, what I'm going to do is turn over the microphone and ask any of my colleagues if they have any final comments they'd like to make before the budget, about the budget, before this group. So I'll pass the microphone down. We'll start the right-hand side. Ladies first.
Well, I'll just say, ooh, that's very loud. Sorry. I'll just say very quickly that this is my first year on the Board of Finance, and usually I'm out there in the audience with all of you, so I greatly appreciate your time this morning and all of the thoughtfulness that went into your comments. It is definitely hard to balance town services, Board of Education, and tax increases, but I'm really appreciative to have the opportunity to be a part of the process on this side this year, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Stone. This is about, I think it's my 8th budget, so I'm not a rookie at this anymore. This budget, to me, for the first time, or not for the first time, the last couple of years, the rate of increases have been coming down. This budget is, you know, the 1.65 or whatever it's finally voted on increase includes money for paving. You know, we've increased that. We've increased sidewalk maintenance by about 25%. We've increased senior tax relief. We've taken care of a lot of our long-term liabilities. OPEB is fully funded. We've increased our contribution to the surplus. We've also added staff in the conservation department. and I think a school nurse. And, so I think it's, like we've heard, it's a balancing act. We all pay taxes here, so none of us want to pay any more than we have to. The other thing I want to say is we got this thing, I think it was from the Taxpayer Association, and it's something that I've been looking at for quite some time, and I think Fairfield is pretty well fiscally managed. I think the problem that we have is we have a lot of problems, and it's really in Hartford. And I think you should start paying attention to what's going on in Hartford, because there's a lot of the school costs are unfunded mandates that we have to take care of, and there's a lot of things like that. For instance, even school cost, building cost, construction costs, because of the mandates from Hartford, we have to use prevailing wages. So a lot of the times on the school construction costs, it's 20 or 25% higher than it would have been if we just had regular contractors. So I just keep in mind what's going on in Hartford. I think it's very important because I've been doing this budget for 8 years now, and there's not that much fat left to take out. So if there's going to be anything to decrease taxes, it has to come from what's going on in Hartford.
Thank you. My name's John Matola. I'm a newer member. I served on the RTM and the Board of Education prior to being here. I agree with what Mr. Stone said. Over the last several years, in serving on the Board of Ed and the RTM and now in this body, I think we spend our money wisely here in Fairfield, and we do a pretty good job. I've been saying for years that I think some of the problems with taxes is at the state and federal level, and that perhaps, we keep a focus obviously on the local level, but we need to start looking at that also, because that affects us tremendously. My intention right now, I have a few more days to take a look at this budget, is I'm going to support it probably. I think it's a fiscally responsible budget. It funds the Board of Ed. It funds our pension adequately. There's good news in this budget this year. The one thing I did wanted to raise, and Mr. Flynn, you can help me with this, because I think Mr. McKenzie mentioned it. If the good news was stripped out of this budget, I thought that the increase would be around 2.8%. Wasn't that what we were talking about that the other night?
That is what Mr.
Mayor was saying. So it's not 5%, it's about 2.8%. We could talk about it, but that's, we were talking about this the other night, and it's, as Mr. Flynn said, it's online. You can look at that meeting. So thank you for coming out today, and I look forward to continue to represent you.
Mr. Matola, let's go all the way down the end. Mr. Becker.
Great. Thank you. David Becker. This is my 6th budget, 2nd with this board. The previous 4 were on the RTM. It was certainly nice to see an increase on the tax side that was much closer to the rate of inflation this year. Was brought down to earth after all the years of some pretty significant proposals and even a few getting through by the end of the boards. I do find myself a little bit concerned in that the growth side in the budget this year is certainly outpacing even that of some previous years, but ultimately the amount that's being paid out by the taxpayers and the tax increase, keeping that in check is probably a good way to kind of balance out the fact that in a lot of areas things have been so stagnant that at some point you do have to ask yourself about that department heads keeping things at zero. At some point all their costs are actually escalating with inflation, which has actually been a real problem. So you do want to make sure that everyone's able to continue to provide the right services in the town. And I think that that's where the strategic plan will come into place. I'm glad to see that in this year as well. But that'll give us a better idea long term. It'll be the first step really in figuring out, you know, what is that town that we want to be in. I mean, I think everyone has their view and sort of knows where they want to go, but being able to really bring some clarity. But this year was certainly, you know, even with some of the gimmies on the budget side, there's a lot of restraint that was put in advance, and I think that's the work of a lot of people over the last couple of years. And you know, I certainly just want to see that trend continue. So, but thank you everyone for coming out today.
Good morning, Chris DeWitt. When I woke up this morning, saw snow and rain. Saturday morning, I figured we'd all be sitting here talking to Bud Morton. So thank you for coming out. I know somebody mentioned attendance today. I think this is fantastic attendance for a day like this, so thank you. It's testimony to your tenacity and commitment to the town. This is my 9th budget, and I can tell you budgets don't come easy. I learned that, I think, the first year. But what I learned the first year, too, from our chairman, Mr. Kiley, who is now Selectman Kiley, and followed on perfectly by Mr. Flynn, is that, you know what, consistency is very important. We could be, I think we used to be, 9 years ago, very reactive. Something would come up, we would, oh, we got to do this, we would react, and we would absorb it. I feel like we're proactive now, into this process now. In fact, a couple days ago, Mr. Walsh brought up a great comment about not this year's budget, but how this year's budget is going to affect next year's budget. So do we pay a little more money this year to make the budget smooth out this year? You know, is it 2% this year, so next year's 2%? Or is it 1.5 this year, so next year's budget's 3? You know, this is the stuff that we talk about. And I feel a lot more confident as a financial body, if you will, that discussion is happening rather than what is happening this year to make sure the budget is what it needs to be. I know our RTM colleague brought up that this is a windfall year, and I would agree. And sometimes in a windfall year, it's easier to just roll with everything. I don't feel like we do that, and I don't feel like the administration does that. So I'm happy with the group. I'm happy with the body. And one other comment I wanted to make about comment made here, but someone said tensions between groups, or maybe I'm misquoting a little bit. But you know, the fact that Pequot Library wants to come out today, and the fact that the education people want to come out and talk, this is all good stuff. There's no tension. People want to hear this, people want to be heard. So continue to be heard, continue to let us be heard. When we get a tougher budget year, we have to consider other options. You know, maybe this year there's no other options to consider, but you know, next year could be a different story. So thank you for your input into this process. It's very important.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning. My name's Jim Brown, and this is my 6th budget, which is hard to believe that I've been on this board 6 years. It flies, except for March. March is slow. We meet about 25 times a year. I think half of that is in March, and it's a tough process, but obviously a very necessary one. And in my experience, it's been a very positive one. I'm honored to be on this board, working with fine people, doing the work of the town. Now, I'll say that even March is 30 days, but we're all involved for 12 months, and I've also found that so is the town. We have a very engaged town with getting involved, not just, you know, look at the people that are on the building committees, the RTM, the Board of Ed, Board of Finance. I mean, there's a lot of volunteers, to PTA, to make this place work. So, and again, it's all to our benefit. So what we have before us is a 1.6% increase in the mill rate. We've had proposals that have come before us that were much higher, 6%, 4%, 3%. This year it's 1.6%. Does not mean that this budget does not get the same due diligence. It absolutely will. I agree with about the comments with Hartford. In my opinion, there's a lot going on up there that we do need to be engaged with and stay in touch with and understand how it affects us here in Fairfield. However, we have this budget, and this is what we can control. So we do the due diligence and do the work that's needed. We realize that the decisions that we make affect us in future budgets, so we make them very carefully. We have to take a long-term view. Mr. Flynn has been an advocate of a strategic plan since I've been on the board, and it's nice to see that we are going to have one, because we understand by going through this year after year, you can't just look at it from 215 to 216 and 216 to 217 and 218 and 219, because then all you have is what's left is just to be reactive. To be proactive, you need a plan. What are we aiming for? What are our goals? What are our objectives? How are we going to get there? Who's going to be involved? And then I think you start seeing where we don't have to constantly weigh services versus costs. Because another thing I've learned over the 6 years is people want their services, and they should. We pay for the services. We weigh that against affordability. We weigh it against efficiency. We take a look at the model. All that, I believe, will go into the strategic plan. So we have our budget drivers. If you see this book, page 32, there's our budget drivers. But there's more to it than that. Yes, some of them are down, but that doesn't mean we don't take a look at every line item, which, believe it or not, we do. We look at every line item in this budget. And we look at the Board of Ed as well, and then we make a decision. But we need your input, which you've done today. So thank you very much for coming to us. You have our emails. Please don't stop. We vote on Thursday, so you have less than a week to, if you have any further comment, to get them to us. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Thursday. I believe the Board of Selectmen votes Tuesday. So thank you.
All right, and I'll wrap up briefly. I want to focus on one thing, and that's long-term planning. There was a lot of conversations or comments made by board members that I agree with, related to somebody saying there's not a lot we can do with the budget to cut back on spending, given so much of it is contractual and so much of it is debt related and so much of it are obligations that have already been agreed to, services we must provide as mandated by Hartford, another comment I agree to. There was a comment made about that in the last few years we've been much more proactive in our management of the finances of the town. I would add this board in particular has been much more proactive in appropriately funding our long-term liabilities. Why I'm so interested in a strategic plan is this. There's a lot of conversation out there and a lot of articles out there about the state of Connecticut. And you heard some compelling comments today about benchmarking our state related to taxes, related to spending, and related to what's going on with citizens leaving the town, the citizens leaving the state. As currently constructed, we are well managed financially. What I want to challenge is how we are currently constructed, because that's the only way we're really going to control spending moving forward. We have to look at the way we do things, the way we're organized, the way we're managed, the services we provide. We're a 375-year-old town. We need to act like a 21st century town. So I challenge our community as a whole, not just our public officials, but all of us, to look at the way our town does its business, look at the way we're constructed, and decide, is there a better way? It's kind of the innovator's dilemma, right? If you asked somebody 100 years ago for transportation, what would they want? They wouldn't have said they wanted a car. They would have said they wanted a faster horse, right? Now, with proper planning and a long-term look at all the services we provide and how we provide them, is our opportunity to design something better, more efficient, that'll guide us through the 21st century. And that's what we need. That's how you control spending. That's how you continue to invest in the children. That's how you continue to invest in the appropriate services that the town wants to provide. And that's what I'm interested in seeing as we move forward. Or else we will continue to have these types of tax increases, maybe at the 3% level, as these costs just continue to rise. So I also want to extend my appreciation and my thanks for all of you coming out today. I also want to extend this board's appreciation and thanks to the administration, both on the town side and the Board of Education side. They were extremely good budget presentations this year. The follow-up was excellent. There's a lot of hard work and effort that goes into it, and we appreciate all of our colleagues and all the town bodies and all the hard work and effort that they put in. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.